One of the Nashville Predators' biggest problems last season was goal scoring. Today, we're going to tell you what has to happen to light the lamp.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are, of course, your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off our week shouting out our Locked On Predators insiders and our everydayers who tune in Monday through Friday to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer and co-host with Penalty Box Radio. And friends, I have a partner in crime.
That you do. I am Emma Lingan, and I'm an NHL reporter with the Hockey News.
Well, we are kicking off a series talking about what has to be better next season. And friends, it's a long series, so buckle up. We're going to look ahead to training camp, and one of the problems Nashville has to solve right off the bat is goal scoring. One of the biggest challenges the Predators had last season statistically was scoring goals. Today, we're going to take a brief look back at the stats from last season to talk about what was and what was not working. And we're going to talk about what we need to see early and often from this team to fix that goal scoring problem. All right, Emma, I said this to you before we started recording, knowing we're going to be talking about how the Predators have got to figure out how to score goals. Let's just revisit the fact that this was never a topic we did last offseason after they signed Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. You could have bet I would never in a million years have thought that a topic that we would have to tackle would be how the heck is Nashville going to score goals? But here we are.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, on Sunday, I was watching the Steelers-Jets game, go
Come
Steelers,
on.
and it was funny on the broadcast. It was actually JJ Watt was talking about how he said something that was a bit triggering to me as someone who covers the Nashville Predators. And he said, I think he was talking about the Jets, and he said, all you know is you can't win anything on paper. You can win the off season and lose the season. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it was too soon. I feel triggered by this, but that's what this feels like. It's like that was the year, getting Stamkos, getting Marchessault. They won the off season, and then they very much did not win the season. So this is not what we thought we'd be talking about, but no, hey, here we are.
Of all of the problems that we thought Nashville could have going into last season, goal scoring was just not even on the radar for anyone. It was not on the radar. And yet Nashville finished second to last season in goals scored. They scored 212 goals, third worst goal differential, which means you take the goals that you scored and you subtract the goals that you gave up. Nashville was minus 62, friends. They allowed 62 more goals than they scored. They had the worst shooting percentage in the league. It was bad. And that was not anything that anybody thought was going to be a problem for the Predators. What is interesting, Emma, is when you separate some of those numbers out and you talk about, okay, those are all situation numbers. What about on the power play? Nashville was 12th in goals on the power play. They were 18th in shooting percentage on the power play. So really what we know is that we have a 5-on-5 problem. And, Dr. Phil, I don't agree with everything he says, but he says you can't change what you don't acknowledge. And friends, we have to acknowledge that Nashville could not score goals at 5-on-5. We know the team has delved into the details, into the X's and O's of it. But Emma, if you take kind of a big step back and look at it, big picture, what was the problem at 5-on-5?
Well, I think if we knew, then it probably would have been fixed before the season was over. Clearly it wasn't. I think it's a few things. One thing that, now hear me when I say that I am not blaming it all on this, but there is an element of luck. There is an element of luck
Yes,
to this.
there is.
How many goalposts did they hit last year? I mean, the shooting percentage, like for certain guys, it's not that they weren't taking shots, they just were missing the net. And so I think that part of it is luck.
Mhm.
Part of it is just everything that went wrong could have. That is just a part of it, but you have to acknowledge it's real.
Right.
But
It
as
is.
far, and that's not something that they can control. As far as things that they can control, I think, I mean, there's a few things. There's number one, we've talked about consistency with personnel, just with line mates and, working as a 5-man unit. It's hard to work as a 5-man unit when you don't know who the other 4 men are that are going to be on the ice with you at any given time. So
Yes.
that's part of it. I think that the constant revolving door on the back end on the blue line was a problem. I think that the slow start was a problem, and it was just trying to catch a moving train. And the other day when you and I were talking about Matthew Wood, and you had said that you went back and watched some of his he came in at the very end of the season, played in a few games for Nashville. So at that point in the season, and you had said, "Oh, this is really rough to watch."
It was.
I think morale is part of it. It gets to a point
Yeah.
where it was just the baton death march to get to the end of the year. And I think so. I'm curious now. I think morale is a part of it, but I would maybe turn the question back on you when watching that. Like, what made it so difficult to watch, and what made it,
Mhm.
anything that you could have maybe pinpointed as far as like, oh, this is why they can't score?
It's so funny that you say that because I was thinking about that, and I'm telling you, there was a vibe. I don't know if you remember the wonderful quote from Ryan Johansson, of which there are many, where he says to Robbie Stanley, "We're vibing, Robbie." Well, to misquote Ryan Johansson, as I watched those 6 games back, they were not vibing, Robbie. There was no vibes. And it really was trudging, is the only word I can think of to describe the vibe at the end of. They were trudging through the games, and it wasn't that they had given up. I don't think that this was a team that was like, "Oh well, let's just check the boxes and get out of here." I think that they were almost shell shocked and just trudging through. And you hear a lot of hockey lingo and you think, okay, what are you really saying? But you mentioned one thing that we heard very consistently in the locker room post game, and that was, we didn't play as a 5-man unit. We heard that over and over and over again. And at one point I said to Roman Josi, "Tell me what it looks like when you do." Because we keep hearing we're not playing as a 5-man unit. Okay, tell me what is the difference? And he went on to say, like, we are passing crisply. We know where the next person is going to be. We quickly get it out of the zone. We anticipate what is happening next. We trust that somebody else is going to be where we think they're going to be. And we didn't see that. The other kind of hockey slang that we heard a lot, and we heard this from Andrew Brunette quite often last season, is he talked about the players were gripping their sticks so tightly. And you're like, okay, that's hockey slang. But you can see them do that. Like, I have to push through this brick wall. And they were not able to run through it like the Kool-Aid man. That never happened. They literally just kept going up against this, but they were trying so hard to get through this scoring struggle. And it just became trudging offensively through the season. You talk about puck luck. Nashville was 8th when you talk about shots taken, shots per game. They were putting the puck on net. Now, we saw some goalies have really good games against the Nashville Predators, but at some point in time, like, there is an element of puck luck, but you have to be able to push through it. And I think when we talk about something like goal scoring that was so bad last year, my concern is, have they shaken off the mental aspect of that enough to deal with the practical, logistical aspect of it? Because, y'all, it was brutal. I don't know if you remember, but it was brutal. Yeah.
We remember.
Oh,
We were
we
there.
remember.
All 84 years, we were there.
We were there. Yeah, coming up, we're going to talk a little bit more about the off ice component of goal scoring. We're going to explain we think the problem there was and why next season could potentially be better when it comes to goal scoring. Today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is finally here, friends, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for all those kickoffs with a can't miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You're going to love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it is player props, whether you want to build a same game parlay, or you even just want to jump in live as the action unfolds. It's going to make every game even more exciting, whether you are watching your favorite team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting fanduel.com to get started. That's fanduel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, Emma, we talk about the X's and O's and the logistics, but so much of hockey is mental. And, this is a sport where we joke about how superstitious they are, but these are hockey players who really, this is athletes who focus on repetition and routine to kind of stay in the zone. And so I go back to the beginning of the season, and I am telling you, and I know this may seem far-fetched, but I really wonder what this season could have been if in the very first game against the Dallas Stars, at the very end of the game, Steven Stamkos, instead of hitting the post, scored that goal. I go back to that. Like, what could have been in that one shot? Would that have changed things?
I mean, we can this whole year, this whole season has been a what if, what if this had happened or this hadn't happened? I mean, I think, yeah, maybe winning that first game against Dallas, maybe not that specific moment, but I think winning that first game against Dallas, if you'll recall, I know it was 84 years ago, but they also did not have UC Saros that night. He was injured, and it was Scott Wedgwood. Remember him?
Very
in net
vaguely.
against his former team, and didn't look great. But I think that, we saw some signs of life from Nashville in that game. And I remember walking away from that game and thinking, okay, you know what? It's Dallas. Nashville was not expected to win. So, losing hurts. I get it. But you know what? I could see it. I could see signs of life. I think, I think they're going to be okay. They were not okay. The rest
Spoiler
of the
alert.
year was not okay. So I mean, again, you can what if, for the rest of time, and you'll never know. But I think that maybe not with that Stamkos shot specifically, but just in general, like if they had won that game, what would that have done?
Yeah, because I do think losing the first 5, I think that absolutely messed with this team mentally because, that Dallas game, like you said, you could see it, but then the next 4 games, they couldn't put it together, and immediately you start saying, "Oh my gosh, what's going on? Like Steven Stamkos is not scoring and we're not seeing what we thought we were going to see right away." And some of the players who were really, really good last season, they're struggling right out of the gate. And I think that really messed with this team. And that's why individually and collectively, I think the start of the season is going to be so critical for this team because not only just logistically, you can't lose the first 5 games. I think mentally, this team cannot have another early stretch where they can't quite put it together.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where normally I would say, like, okay, guys, like the first 5 games does not dictate how the rest of the season is going to go necessarily. But this year, it kind of does for
Yeah.
Nashville. Like, I don't think that, I don't necessarily I don't think they need to go 5-0 to start the season. I think you need at least a split 3-2, 2-3.
Yeah.
Even like I'd be okay with that, but I think you need something. You need better than what you got last year, because again, it was early enough in the year last year that you thought even after starting 0-5, it was like, okay, that sucked, but there's time. It's not going to be like this the whole season. On the flip side, you can look at Winnipeg, who started the season, like they won like 15 in a row or something to start the
Yeah.
year. And everybody said the same thing, where it was like, okay, that's cute, but like they're going to drop off at some point, and they never did. So it's
No.
like it goes both ways. But I think that it was just one of those things that normally I would say the first 5 games of an 82 game season mathematically, don't have the biggest impact, but this year in these circumstances, they do.
They do. Another off ice component that I think we need to weigh when it comes to looking forward, and especially something with goal scoring, is expectations. Man, Nashville last season, all eyes on you. Steven Stamkos, we're watching you. Jonathan Marchessault, we're watching you. Ooh, this team is on the rise, and they added this. And the expectations and the spotlight was on this team. And this was not a local media thing. This was a national hockey media thing, and I think it is better for Nashville. It is better for these players to go into this season with the team being an under the radar, ain't nobody really paying attention to you team, because I do think the pressure got to them. I do think the spotlight got to them. I think it was a lot for Stamkos. I think it was a lot for some of these young players who had stepped up the previous season. I think expectations really can mess with you. And I know they're professional athletes, and you go out there and you do your job and you score a goal, whether one person's watching or 20 people are watching. But this was a very different season. This was a very different off season. It was the biggest off season in franchise history. Everybody was watching. Now they go into this season, and it's very much that underdog thing. And Jonathan Marchessault said, you know what? I like that. I like that you're going to underestimate us. And I think that may work in Nashville's favor.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Jonathan Marchessault likes that. He's one of the original misfits from Vegas.
Yes.
That's exactly what their identity was. Is like, we're all of every other team's cast-offs. They didn't want us, so we made our own team, and we made it to the Cup final our first year. Like, I think that is the kind of mentality that you have to thrive off of, if you're in this situation, which I think they can. But, people, you hear a lot of different things, a lot of different narratives about it, where people say like, well, Nashville needs to, like you just said, not have as many expectations on them in order for them to, that's when they're at their best, when there aren't expectations on them. Think about like 2 seasons ago when Andrew Brunette first took over.
Right.
They weren't supposed to do anything. They went to the playoffs that year. But then, the counter argument, sometimes people will say, well, yeah, but then the year they made it to the Cup final, there were a lot of expectations on them after that, and that worked. They went and they won the President's Trophy the next year. Okay, we need to stop comparing this team to what happened back in 2017 and 2018.
Yeah.
It is like we're coming up on almost a decade ago now. So like we need to stop thinking in terms of that. I think it's a very different team, very different organization now. And you were talking about the pressure getting to players. I mean, I would argue that it got to, I mean, they wouldn't admit it, but I mean, it got to Andrew Brunette and Barry Trotz too.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is an element of that, like, okay, no one believes in us. They acknowledge it too. It's like, we didn't give them a reason to. Like we didn't really do anything worth believing in last year. But we know what we're capable of, and now we got to put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah. One other thing that I think that is kind of an off ice component that will help, and I think you will see it statistically when it comes to goal scoring, is that these players know each other a little bit better. And that matters. We've heard that the guys are getting together, obviously training camps around the corner, but they're skating together. You've got O'Reilly and Stamkos and Marchessault and Forsberg, and all these guys are getting together and they're skating together. And you need that. And this is a time where Marchessault and Stamkos aren't still trying to find the catch up and trying to get to know their teammates. Like, it's a little bit of a different opportunity, and they've had 82 games to kind of get to know how they play. And so I do think there is a comfortability factor that is going to help this team. And I do think you will see it statistically show up in something like goal scoring for the team. Here's hoping.
We have to hope. That's all we have now. Duct tape and a dream.
That's right. Coming up, we're going to look at some statistics that should make you feel maybe a little bit better about what Nashville will be able to do when it comes to scoring goals next season. All right, Emma, I was digging through some numbers. I don't like mathing, but I thought this was really important. And if you look at the top kind of 5 big players that Nashville has, especially in regards to goal scoring: Roman Josi, Filip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, Jonathan Marchessault, Steven Stamkos. If those players, just those 5, got back to their career average, I'm not talking about franchise setting record season, I'm talking career average, Nashville would add 37 goals to the score sheet. That's just them playing at their average. 37 goals last season would have put Nashville in the mix goal scoring with a team like the LA Kings, with teams that snuck into the postseason. So while I think that you don't want to be like, what's the big deal? The goal scoring is there. If just those 5 players just have an average season, just average, y'all. You don't need to get an A. Bring home a C.
It's like we talk about regressing to the mean. We need these guys to progress to the mean just to get to the and then no, but I mean, I hear you. And I think that obviously what we saw was a below average across the board performance from everybody. Maybe Filip Forsberg.
Except for Forsberg, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's hard though, because you talk about, yes, that would improve their offense. It would improve the goal scoring. It would put them in the same company as teams like the LA Kings who made it to the playoffs. The problem, though, is that even if they add, what'd you say, 37 goals?
37, yep.
I still don't know that they finish any higher in the Central Division. And that's the problem, is that they play in a really freaking hard division. And so, yes, the offense would be better and maybe you'd feel better about this team, but I still don't know that they would be a playoff team if that was the only thing that changed. Right. Now, you've got other things. And I know obviously today we're talking strictly about goal scoring, but let's just say the defense was exactly what it was last year, and all that changed was we added 37 more goals. I still don't think this is a playoff team.
No.
And I don't, not only that, again, I don't even know if they finish above where they finished in the Central. And that's, I mean, again, there's only so much you can do. You control what you can control, but the fact is you're in a really tough division. And so I think yes, adding 37 goals, getting to their average, that would be great. And it would be. I mean, it would be hard to get worse than last year, but
true facts.
I think that it's important to keep in mind that it's like, okay, goal scoring was a big problem, but it was not the only problem. And it was not the only thing that was keeping them, out of the playoff race.
Yeah. Last season's Predators team was like an ogre. It had layers. There were so many layers. It was the
Like an
Shrek of the
onion.
NHL. Yes. It
Yes.
just layer upon layer of, issues that made you cry like an onion.
Yes.
The other thing that I will say is an interesting tidbit when you look at last season and you're trying to figure out what does it mean for next season. Nashville lost, and I can't remember the stat, and I did the math. The math was math, and I was on fire mathing. And of course, I didn't write it down, but Nashville lost like double digits games by 1 goal or 1 goal and an empty net goal. So 2 goals, just, an insurance goal. And if you can score a couple goals more here and there, and like you said, there are more components to this that we're going to dive into, like defense and goaltending and all of that. But you have a different outcome if you win those close games. Nashville did not win close games. They did not win close games. And you have to do that, especially against Central Division teams, if you hope to be a better team next season with a roster that, let's face it, is basically the same. Basically, it's the same.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't win close games and they couldn't rally. They couldn't come from behind.
No.
It was like if they were behind by more than a goal at the end of the first period, sometimes even one, if they were just down 1-0, it was like, well,
There
that's
goes
it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which
There
is a
was
very
no
deflating
pushback.
there's a very deflating feeling because it was like as soon as, if whether like even if Nashville scored first and the other team immediately scored in response, because that I feel like happened a lot too,
Mhm.
just sucked the air out of the place.
Yeah.
And it was just like, well, there's that. Like you said, there was no fight, there was no
Yeah.
pushback.
There was no resiliency. Like that is a word, they talked about relentless was their word 2 seasons ago. Resiliency is what this team was lacking, and it happened individually, which then spilled over collectively. And if that is something this team can build on, I think, again, I go back to one of the stats that you'll see that reflected in is something like goal scoring. Emma, when you look at this team, what is best case scenario for goal scoring for you? What is worst case scenario? Or what are the factors that are going to improve it? And what is going to, heaven help us, still keep them in the dungeon of points?
Well, if we run it back and do everything that they did last year, then I would say, yeah, enjoy the dungeon, make yourself at home. But I think that, I mean, listen, best case scenario would be what year was it? Like the 2021-22 season when like everybody had franchise years or
Yes.
everyone had career years in
Mhm.
scoring, like Matt
Yep.
Duchene set the new franchise record, like everyone had career years. I
Yeah.
think that would be the best case scenario.
Mhm.
Now I'm not acknowledging that as a realistic scenario, but it could happen. Um, I think I don't even know. Like I
Mhm.
don't even know. I think the most realistic best case scenario is you fix your fix your goal scoring problem enough that you beat out teams that are maybe right around you in the mix, in the division race. So it's like if you can finish ahead of Minnesota, if you can
Yeah.
finish ahead of St. Louis, those are playoff teams last year. If you can finish ahead of Utah, I mean that I still don't think you're touching Dallas and Colorado, but I mean that just is what it is. But I think that there needs to be, again, I keep coming back to consistency with personnel. You need to have some sort of identity for this team. And this team had nothing last year. There was no identity, there was
Mhm.
no fight, no resiliency, like you said. So you just need to get to a point where, and I don't even know how to like quantify this, but you need to
Mhm.
get to a point where the other team scores first and you don't immediately think, well, that's a loss.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't even know how to quantify that, but it was just like some kind of pushback and some kind of identity, some kind of offensive identity, because again, I keep wanting to bring up the defense and that's a whole other issue, but I think that you need an offensive identity, whether that's like, and every team's offensive identity looks different. Some revolves around one player. If you have a Connor McDavid or a Nathan McKinnon, like that's your identity. Get the puck to that guy. But then other times, it's like, oh, we don't have any fancy, skilled goal scorers, but we're going to score the ugly goals, get to the front of the net, get to whatever it is. I don't care what it is, but you need an identity. You need something that says like, this is our calling card and this is how we are going to gain an edge over other teams offensively. And they just had nothing last year.
Nothing. And it's so interesting because they had the personnel to have something. They had the elite goal scorer personnel to like play that angle, and it didn't materialize. And I'm with you. One of the things that I noticed when it came to goal scoring is that it looked different when Michael Bunting joined the team, because finally we had the guy who was in front of the net and going, oh, I'll take the trash out. And that was something we were missing. So for me, I want to see a Michael Bunting. I'm even going to throw like Eric Holla in there and say like, he's not going to be glamorous. He's not going to knock your socks off. He's not going to just soar to the top of the stat sheet and save the Predators offensively. But give me somebody who's going to do the dirty work in a depth position and see what happens for this team offensively. And it is very hard to predict.
It is. And maybe that takes, we were talking about pressure of expectations. Maybe that takes some of the pressure off of the Filip Forsbergs and the Jonathan Marchessaults, et cetera, because I think if you get scoring from throughout your lineup, that's what you need. You would have looked at Nashville last year maybe and thought, oh, they have a top heavy lineup. Turns out their lineup wasn't heavy anywhere. It just
lightweight.
It was very light.
Lightweight.
But I mean, if you can get scoring from throughout your lineup, because even guys like, now listen, hear me when I say I am not advocating that the Predators build their offensive strategy around a guy like Michael McCarron. But I think that even guys like him, like Cole Smith, like Colton Sissons, who's no longer here, but same idea, where there are these depth players that had big years in their first season under Andrew Brunette, and then they completely went quiet the next year. So it's like, even those guys, you need more from everybody. It's not just like, oh, once Steven Stamkos starts scoring, then like we're cooking. It's not just, oh, this one guy needs to turn it on. It's everybody.
Yeah. And it's interesting. We talk about what do we want to see at training camp. And I'm very hesitant, especially when it comes to how much better I'm going to feel after training camp when it comes to goal scoring. Because if you recall, Emma, training camp last season, Nyquist, Ryan O'Reilly, and Filip Forsberg were on freaking fire. Tommy Novak,
about Gus Nyquist,
the other Swedish. I know. I'm like, he was here last year. But, Tommy Novak looked very comfortable centering a second line in training camp. Training camp, if I learned anything, it is that training camp is a mirage and a false sense of security. But
that was the biggest
consistency.
Yes, training camp was the biggest like pump fake last year. It was like, oh yeah, no, we're good. Maybe part of it was we were seeing what we wanted to see a little bit. I don't know, but it's also hard. Like, I would just say when it comes to training camp to anybody, don't get too hung up on like the performances in the early days of camp, like before they've made roster cuts, because you're not going to get a really good idea of what players are going to look like when they're playing with players who are not going to make the roster, That's like when everyone is still there. So that's getting into the weeds a bit, but I do think that I am going to approach training camp this year with like, okay, because I think we're all guilty of it. We all we're riding the high of the off season that the
Yeah.
Predators had. And it's like coming into camp, like, okay, let's see what we got. And there was just like this vibe of optimism, excitement. And I think, part of that is maybe to blame for like why the expectations obviously were so high. And then when they were not met, it just felt especially bad. So I don't know. Now it's like being as objective as possible going into
Right.
training camp. It's like, okay, what do we really have here?
Yeah. We're taking off the rose-colored glasses and we're wearing our jaded, bifocals here. Like
Yes.
that's just what training camp is going to be like. It's going to be really interesting. And again, goal scoring has to be better for this Nashville Predators team. And we have to see what Andrew Brunette puts together in training camp. We have to see what the individual players are able to do. And let us not hear the sound of failure in training camp quite so often, because you want to talk about having a little hockey PTSD. That sound is going to make us twitchy. It's going to make us twitchy. So let us know what you think. Do you think Nashville can get better goal scoring next season? And what is it going to take offensively for that to happen? Let us know in the comments of this video. You can, of course, find us on social media and let us know your thoughts there. LO_Predators. Emma mentioned this. We are going to tackle another really important component of the Nashville Predators getting better on tomorrow's show. We are going to talk about what has to be different for the defense. It's going to be quite the episode, you all. Before we wrap up today's show, though, Emma, will you let everyone know where they can find you and your work?
Yes, you can follow me on social media at Emma_Lingan, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
You can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work with Penalty Box Radio as well. That is going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. We're going to be back tomorrow tackling the defense. We'll see you then.